I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stat.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
But I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. If you're new here, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, but also look in the description. I've got links to all the other platforms I'm on: Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the social media platforms I haven't been banned off of. Please follow me on all of those, but specifically Substack. I'm putting out Substacks 2 or 3 times a week. And then also Telegram. I'm using that as my alternative to Twitter because, as you know, I'm not allowed on Twitter anymore. So please go follow me on both of those places. And everywhere else you want to. It's in the description. You'll see the links right there, right below the stuff for Bruce. So today I got an interesting guest. I actually finally ran into him when I was in Florida, of all places, even though we both live in New Hampshire. He was down at Young Americans for Liberty as I was, and I ran into him, and we had a little discussion about how I could vote for him in the primary. He's running as a Republican. Lots of you guys, if you're in New Hampshire, you've seen this guy's signs all over the place, especially on the east side of the state. Really doing well at the sign game. Bruce Fenton, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Reed.
Yeah, absolutely,
good to see you,
man. Yeah, you too. So before we get into the specifics of your Senate campaign or anything, I just want, before I assign any labels to you that might not be accurate, I just want you to kind of describe what your philosophy is in general. What is it you believe in? It says on your website you believe in liberty, freedom, and New Hampshire. I believe in all those things too, but I just want you to expand on that a little bit. What do you think is wrong with this country? And the state? What do we need to do as citizens and as voters? And which way do you want to see the state and the country go in the future?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think the answers in to both kind of where I want to see things go and the philosophy is the same, which is that I just don't want government. I don't want any person to rule over another person or do violence to another person unless it's in defense or, enacting justice for a crime against their life, liberty, or property. So other than that, I just don't want to have government be the one to do any of this stuff. There's plenty of worthy things that might be good, like giving people free health care or whatever. That's all fine, but I don't think government should do it. If somebody wants to give free health care, they should donate the money to give the free health care. Good ideas don't need government. And my overall philosophy is that government's just about the most dangerous thing humanity's ever invented. It's this very weird idea that certain people can have power to do force over other people, and that's all that it really is at the end of the day, is just using force against people. And it's a very, very, very dangerous, deadly tool. It's worse than Ebola. Government has killed way more people than Ebola, way more people than COVID, way more people than almost anything that we've created. So it should be, and we can debate about when it's okay to use government or whatever, but I think you have to recognize that first, that it's like Ebola that you're dealing with. It's like a toddler with a Gatling gun. It's a super, super, super dangerous thing. And there might be a good reason for a toddler to have a Gatling gun, but you want to really, really be careful about it before you do it. So that's what I'd like to see with government. I'd like to see it cut almost in as we know it, almost entirely, 95%, probably something like that, and as far as where the country is, one reason I'm running is because I'm really concerned about us going down. We're in a time of epic change. Everything's changing and shaking up, and we could go down a path of more tyranny, or we could go down a path like New Hampshire is doing in a lot of ways, going down a path of more freedom. So, I'm hoping we go down the path of more freedom, because this is really crucial times for our nation, for humanity. We're in historical times. This isn't 1996,
Yeah, for sure. So do you view the Senate as something that is salvageable at this point? Do you think if you actually make it in there that you will be able to turn things around, or are you hoping to be there more as a shining light, trying to draw attention to all the chaos? Or both? Or what do you think you're going to be able to do if you get in there?
It's a little of both. Like a lot of ANCAPs and libertarians, I'm jaded by government. Part of me just says it's worthless. I totally sympathize with the people who don't even bother voting, and I sympathize with the people who think this is a fool's errand, that it can't change. I get that. But it really does matter, like the old saying, you may not pay attention to government still pays attention to you. Just 2 days ago, the vote came down to one vote on this 87,000 IRS agent thing. That will affect us here in New Hampshire. I would have voted obviously no. Hassan voted yes. So that's a real tangible, real thing. You really, it's easy to be jaded, but you really can matter. That vote mattered. Other votes matter. One single vote can matter. You can also change the process. You can subpoena people. You can call them in for Senate hearings. You can do filibusters. You can delay nominations. I did a sample filibuster I made it 33 hours the other day. I wanted to break Strom Thurmond's record. So there's 100% chance that I could break that record if I was in the Senate. I already did it. I proved it. I can definitely break his record. So there's things like that can matter. And here's the interesting thing. Blake Masters won his primary. There's a number of Liberty candidates. And there's a few people that are either Liberty, like Rand Paul, or leaning Liberty in there now. If, depending on how this election goes, suppose I got elected, Blake got elected, 4 or 5 others get elected, and you got Rand and Cynthia Lummis and Ted Cruz and stuff. All of a sudden you have a voting block. 12 people could be one of the most powerful voting blocks in the history of America. 3 people. A lot of these important votes come down to 2-3 votes. One vote often. So 3 people can totally change the thing. And we have a good chance of having an actual coalition. So we could actually change things. And the other thing that's an interesting factor is we are in very unusual times. So this is a 6-year term. In 2 years, we could have a completely unrecognizable world. We could have the Greatest Depression. We could have World War III. We could have anything's on the table in these kind of crazy times. And those are the times when you need people who disruptors who understand change. Somebody who, we may need to get rid of 30 government agencies because we can't afford it. We can't afford it already, but at least I've been recognizing that for years. So my crazy ideas like abolishing these departments, they may not seem so crazy right now. And in 2 years, they may not even be crazy at all. Even Elizabeth Warren may vote for them because she has no choice.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people forget that the Senate, not only does it have fewer people in it, it's only 100 instead of 438, but also the senators, as you were pointing to, have a lot of power. They can block legislation. They can filibuster it. They have a lot more power than a congressman. So when we got Rand Paul into the Senate, that was just a huge, amazing moment. And I wasn't actually a libertarian at that time. I wasn't until like 2014, but just kind of reliving it vicariously through everybody and going back and watching when he got elected and how excited everyone was. It was a huge moment. The thing is, like, Rand has definitely done a pretty good job compared to most other senators, but there have been certain moments where he kind of buckles at the knee and does what the Republican Party wants him to do. What I want to ask you is, it's really easy to oppose the Democrats because they obviously suck. They're horrible on just about everything these days. If you get in there and then the Republicans retake the House and the Senate and then eventually the presidency, how do we know we can count on you to stand up to the Republicans when they have bad ideas too?
Yeah, I've had a pretty consistent record. I protested George W. Bush against the war. I protested war, whether it was Republican or a Democrat. I was against, any kind of, these sort of violent authoritarian actions that have been done by Republicans. And Republicans have done a lot of things that I've spoken out against, the creation of the Patriot Act, the Department of Homeland Security, you know, the bombing countries all over the world, drone bombings, surveillance state. You know, I think Liberty Republican is a very different thing than regular Republican. You know,
Sure.
we're people who care about liberty first, and it's because it's interesting. You know, sometimes I get on my social media and stuff, or you know, with my signs or on my campaign trail, you know, I get Democrats, and they'll just assume that I'm a John McCain Republican. You know, be like, hey, you're whatever, against gay marriage or something, you know, against Muslims or something. That's just absurd. It's completely the opposite. Of you know, so there's kind of a dying breed of the old school Republicans, and I've been consistent about, you know, not being afraid to criticize those things. And even in my campaign trail, I'm one of the only candidates who's criticized McConnell. You know, most candidates won't do that because they're terrified of his PAC, and they know that when you get down there, you're expected to vote the way he tells you. I mean, Chuck Morris is a perfect example. He wouldn't even answer the question about red flag laws. You know, he wouldn't even say, because he's afraid of McConnell. He's going to be a rubber stamp, and he's showing right now that he's a loyal soldier. And I'm showing right now that I'm not a loyal soldier. Mitch McConnell wants to get my vote. He can, you know, he wants me to listen to him. He can move to New Hampshire and be a resident of New Hampshire just like you or anybody else. But I'm not there to represent him. I'm there to represent the people of New Hampshire. If I go down there, and the mandate that I'm running on makes it even more clear, because every single group that I talk to, and pretty much every single interview, I tell the people that I'm going to go down there to vote no on all the expansion, all the tyranny, all the government expansion, no on expansion of the tax base, yes on human rights, freedom, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, every single time. So I just can't vote for something like red flag laws, because that's, you know, I'd be breaking my promise to, I mean, I would never want to anyway, but I also wouldn't want to break my promise to the voters. So yeah, I'd be consistent about that. And I'm also, you know, I think some other people say this, but I really mean it when and it's misinterpreted sometimes, where I say I don't want the job, and some people say, oh gee, you know, why don't you want the job? You know, right. That doesn't make me want to support you. But I think that's what we should want. We should want people who don't want this power. Who, you know, I don't want to go down there and make friends with McConnell. I want to go down there and defend this country and defend our Constitution, defend the New Hampshire people. You know, I don't care about making friends with people. I don't imagine I'd run again. You know, it's such an incredible sacrifice to even consider going down to that swamp hellhole for 6 years and missing out on my farm and my, you know, miss some of the most key formative years of my children's childhood. I mean, it's just crazy. So yeah, I think I know that I'd be very consistent. And there's certain things that I'll just never ever do. You know, I'll never vote for wars of aggression. I'll never vote for spying on Americans. I'll never ever comply with a vax pass or a movement pass. I'll never wear a mask on duty. If I get put in this role and they try and put a mask mandate on the Senate, I won't do it. I will not do it. I will not do it. If that means they won't let me in the building, they won't let me in the building. But there's certain things I just won't compromise on. And I think people who know me know that. You know, it's definitely what we need right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a quick sidestep and just talk, because you brought it up there, your farm and your family. What are you giving up to do this? Like, what is your regular day-to-day life like? What have you done, and what is, you know, what companies or hobbies or practices are you involved in right now that you'd be leaving behind to take this job in the Senate?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think I'm so blessed to have like a life that people could dream of. I mean, I got 4 beautiful children, a beautiful wife. We've been married for almost 30 years. We've built businesses together. I have some cool businesses that I've built up over time to just I built them around me. You know, they serve like what I want to do. They're built to serve my strengths, the things that I enjoy. So, you know, many years ago, I was fortunate enough to get onto a path where I could over time do more and more of what I like. And I was fortunate enough financially to be in a situation where I'm like, I don't want to do anything I don't like anymore. You know, I don't like meetings that much. I just canceled meetings. I had almost no meetings for years and years. You know, there's certain things that I just didn't do. So I've built this like really cool job where all I do all day is stuff that I love. It doesn't even feel like working. And then I got my beautiful children. I have one of the coolest places in New Hampshire, this beautiful farm, 80 acres on the seacoast, right on the Great Bay in Durham. It's a super historic site. Actually, it was in 1694, a guy single-handedly defended his home against almost 100 attackers during the Oyster River massacre. His neighbors, right? I could see it if I didn't have a wall in the way. Right up there, 15 people were killed, and then right behind me, they marched down here and he protected his family. He sent his family away, and he single-handedly fought these guys off right on my land. So it's just an incredibly cool place. And then you know, hobbies, like right in this room next to me, you see my comic book stuff behind me. The room next to me is just filled with comic books. And I mean, as busy as I am in this campaign, you know, part of me is like, man, I just wish I could just sit and read a comic book and play Dungeons and Dragons with my kid. I'm a geek. I'm a super geek, you know, play Dungeons and Dragons or watch a Marvel movie on my TV, you know. So it's a huge sacrifice to go down there. It was one of the big things in the process to say, you know, could I even do this job if I get sent down there? It's miserable. I looked it up and I really thought hard about it. And I looked exactly what the commitment is. It's around 124 days on average. You do get a lot of weekends you can come back. You know, there's pretty easy flights. You can fly right into Manchester. You know, but I had to really consider that stuff because it's a major sacrifice. Like, you know, my kids aren't the right age. You know, they're too big to bring down. You know, they're mostly young teenagers or almost teenagers. You know, like 5th grade through 10th grade. And so, you know, it's a big sacrifice. But I would just go down there, vote no, and come back, and that's it. You know,
I like it. Yeah. So do you look fondly on anyone in the Senate right now, other than Rand Paul? Like, are there any Democrats and Republicans you feel like you could work with to get legislation passed, even if you don't agree with them on a lot of stuff? Are there people who stick out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic. I mean, there's a whole mess of people who are liberty-ish, you know, or have, call it somewhere between 50 to 80% liberty or 90%. I mean, Rand Paul might be 95, you know, he's not probably perfect, but, you know, Thomas Massey, you know, he's in the House, of course, but, you know, he'd be like 98 or something. He's probably one of the best.
Yeah.
But even the people that I don't agree with, because one thing I've been really proud of myself in our industry, the crypto industry, is that I've made friends with kind of everybody. A whole bunch of people who dislike each other, don't talk to each other. I'm friends with all of them. And I'd like to, and especially being a bit of an outsider, you know, I'm much more of an independent. In fact, some people think I'm running as an independent, you know, just because of how I talk. I've had several people, even after I tell them I'm a Republican, they say, well, you're an independent. They just, it doesn't compute in their head because I don't sound like a normal Republican when I talk about drugs and, you know, drug legalization and these kind of things. But, you know, those are the kind of areas I'd love to reach out across the aisle. You know, AOC's in Congress, not the Senate, but she said she was against accredited investor rules. And I was like really excited about that because I can't recall anything I've ever agreed with AOC on. I mean, she's 180 degree different from me, but right. I would like to find common ground with her, just like people in my industry, people I don't like. You know, I am more interested in finding common ground with AOC or Elizabeth Warren, precisely because they are so opposite of me. I think it's an achievement. You know, some of the proudest things I am in life were when I kind of diffused situations, and you know, it's a great feeling if you can make friends with somebody, or at least on some little area. You know, I would love to find something with somebody that I completely disagree with, like Elizabeth Warren, and say, hey, you know, here's something we agree on. Do one little thing, make a little bill that does that thing. And also as we enter what I think are going to be very epic times of change, it's going to be even more important to do these kind of things. If we're facing World War III or we're facing a massive depression, I don't think they're going to be as hung up on, you know, orange man bad, you have R next to your name, I don't talk to you anymore. Right. I think we got to look at America. And I think I could do that probably better than almost any Republican. If I'm down there, I'm certainly not going to be thought of as, you know, a rubber stamp for the official party, you know?
Yeah. No, that's great. So I want to talk about some issues. To start with foreign policy. So a lot of the Republicans are, I would say, pretty good on Ukraine, more than the Democrats, at least. A lot more Republicans seem to realize this has been a money laundering scheme. It's been a mess, something we should never have gotten involved in the first place. However, when it comes to Taiwan and China, they want to draw us into almost the exact same quagmire, you know, either protecting Taiwan from China or getting directly involved with China, provoking them into attacking Taiwan like we did with Russia and Ukraine. You've already touched on it a little bit, but do you have a really hard stance on foreign policy? No foreign aid to any of these countries, no intervention unless it directly threatens our national security? Just kind of expand on your view of foreign policy a little bit, especially when it comes to Taiwan and Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly my policy. Follow the Constitution. We've had these military misadventures all over the world for 50 years now. You know, Vietnam, we were in Afghanistan longer than World War I and World War II combined. And we spent way more money adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation, we spent more money. What on earth did we accomplish? World War II, you can tell what you accomplished. There was some real statists. And one of the only legitimate government roles of government that I like is protecting you from even worse statists. You know, I mean, as bad as government is, it's like the Nazis were worse, and the Axis was worse. The ultimate statists, and so that's a legitimate role to fight that kind of thing. But we went over to Afghanistan. We spent even more money than that and far more time for nothing. They weren't a threat to us. You know, I mean, it wasn't even the right country for the guy that was credited with attacking us. So, and neither was Iraq. You know, Iraq was hundreds of miles away. So, these things are driven by these contractors who have deca-billion-dollar companies and big headquarters all around the Beltway. You know, you drive down the Beltway, it's just brand new building after brand new building, all stuff that was built in the last 20 years, these big, huge headquarters of government contractors, every single one of them, and a whole bunch of brand new cars and mansions in McLean, all paid for by our tax dollars. And a big chunk of it is this, especially more recently, the post 9/11, just ratcheting up the military. I mean, 9/11 was a long time ago, but we ratcheted up and we've never kind of gone back since. We just sort of have this perpetual war. So that it's a horrible incentives, and it's driven by the broken fiat system. Americans would never tolerate this if you had to pay for it. World War II, you had to pay for it. War heroes would come to your town and convince you to hey, this is, hey, listen, Reed, these Nazis are really bad. Could you please buy some war bonds? And you'd sit there and say, can you convince me a little bit more? Tell me why they're bad. They had to make a case. They don't have to make a case now. Even for Nazis, they had to make a case, but today they don't. They just, hey, Reed, we want to throw somebody into prison for 3 years for $70,000 a year because they had a forbidden plant. Do you mind? Doesn't matter. Sorry, Reed, we're printing the money anyway. Hey, do you mind if we bomb Afghanistan for 20 years? Don't care. Print the button. Print the money, and so there's no accountability, and that's bad. So, just from a good and evil standpoint, as well as economic and about a million other reasons, I'm totally against any of these kind of things. We shouldn't be provoking countries. We shouldn't be involving ourselves. It's not our business what happens in Taiwan and China. It's not our business what happens in Ukraine. I was one of the first people to call Zelensky a scammer. It was probably the most negatively received thing I've said in the whole campaign. I got more attacks from that than anything because it was really early. I said it like 2 days into this nonsense months ago. And now I say that all the time, nobody attacks me anymore because they're starting to see that it's true. Even the people on the left are like, I don't know if I want to go out on the limb and challenge Fenton on this claim that Zelensky's a scammer, because they're not quite willing to put their reputation behind him anymore, right? Because it is a scam. It's a total scam, billions and billions of dollars in a total scam. And it's not the scam. Scams are horrible and they really hurt us economically and they hurt people in New Hampshire. But the death and the killing and the destruction is even worse than that. We killed 1 million people in Iraq. That's just absurd. We have to have a reckoning for that, especially if we're going to go around the world talking like we have some sort of moral authority over other countries when we've done some of the most evil things in modern history. So yeah, we got to cut all this stuff out. And the only time I would be in favor of military actions is if somebody is directly threatening us, or they've, are sorry, like here in the U.S., like if they go down to Rye Beach, I'm there, man. I'm gonna grab my guns and I'm all for it. Steal my tax money, tax me, get some tanks. We get together, whatever, fine. But that's not the thing. That's not a thing. Ukraine's not on Rye Beach, and they're not even ever going to come close to Rye Beach, just like Iraq and Afghanis weren't going to come to Rye Beach. So that's the kind of bar I would have. If we're really under threat or they're attacking us, then yeah, have at it. Teach them a lesson they'll never forget. But that's not a thing. We haven't been under threat for anybody in decades.
Yeah, for sure. What I find exasperating and amazing at the same time is whenever we espouse this point of view, we get called isolationists, where we're the ones who want to openly trade with China or Russia. We don't want all these sanctions. We don't want all these trade embargoes and everything. What what do you think we could do to try to reopen negotiations with countries like Cuba, Russia at this point, and China with all these tensions that have escalated with them? What could you do as senator to try to, alleviate tensions from getting to a boiling point from where they are now?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm a big believer that business is a great way to build connections. I mean, when you do a business deal, you care about the other deal, even if it's a tiny little business in New Hampshire who sells, widgets for $100,000 in annual sales to somebody in, I did a lot of business in Saudi Arabia, and it was really eye-opening. It changed my life. It changed my outlook. We vilify these people, and I learned there was, just like anything else, a million misconceptions, just stuff that's totally wrong. And even things that are true, they're misunderstood. There's a lot of things that are misunderstood by us. And I got to hear from, I talked to I met a woman judge. I met female office holders who talk about women's rights, women doctors and surgeons and stuff in Saudi Arabia that would talk about their opinion of women's rights in their own country and what they think about stuff. And, so that's all because of business connections. And I think that if people can learn about these other cultures and learn about people in other countries, and you have more friendship and you have more of a vested interest in saying, hey, let's not go bomb them. I don't want to bomb my business partner. Trade is it's such a natural thing. Cuba it's just so sad. There's so many Cuban Americans who would be, tourism and everything else. I'm not in favor of any sanctions at all. I don't think the government has any business telling anybody you can do this or that, or you can deal with this country or that country. Why not? I'd love to go to Iran and meet people and maybe do business there, like I did in Saudi. Totally different kind of culture, similar part of the world. We should have that freedom, and that would make more peace. So I would love to do bills that eliminate sanctions, open up the country. Cuba, come on, man. What is it? Like a decade before I was born that they put these things in place. It doesn't make any sense anymore. Never made sense. That's the way most of these rules are. The SEC never made sense. It was written in the 1930s, and it didn't make sense then. And they just get even more outdated. It's like, why? What do you mean we can't have Cuban cigars in America? Are you kidding me? That's just absurd. So yeah, that would be a great step towards peace. I don't know, China. It's like there's so much saber rattling and everything, but trade would be a good way. Mainly just government getting out of the way, I think, leads to a lot more peace naturally.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on business. Where business and government kind of merge though and turn into an ugly alliance, when you have things like NATO or our weapons deals that we do with Saudi Arabia. It's not like companies trading with each other. It's the government subsidizing these giant, aid packages to Israel, Saudi Arabia, all these countries that we're allies with. What's your approach to that? Like NATO, our weapons deals with Saudi Arabia, our huge amount of aid to Israel. Would you try to end those things or try to end our involvement with those things and only have voluntary trade between the countries? What's your position there? Yeah,
I'd rather end government involvement in those things. I saw those arms deals happen firsthand in Saudi. I know the people who did the deals. I met them. I'd go to embassy functions, and I wasn't involved in the deals, but I was right there. I talked to some people. One of the days, one of the big deals was closed. I talked to some of the people who worked, like the people who did the deal. And so I always felt it was a big scam when I was there. And I've been to dozens and dozens of these meetings where, you have retired generals and military industrial complex people come in and they give these stern speeches to the Saudis about, you are in a dangerous neighborhood in the world and you must have these weapons. And then it's this whole weird permission thing where the U.S. has got to give permission, like it's some big, bonus, like, oh, we're going to let you buy these weapons. And I'm like, what? All this shady money, like you said, government money. And then, they'll have ambassadors who are former generals who understand how to close the deals. And these are big deals, $30, $50 billion, to represent hundreds of thousands of jobs. So there's all this, who they pick as ambassador. There's Congress members and senators, and there's all kinds of nonsense involved. And it's a scam. It's a scam on us, and it's a scam on the Saudis. They're getting scammed into debt and buying stuff and wasting a bunch of money, and kind of this quid pro quo, like, hey, buy these helicopters and we'll help you out, sort of thing. So they're getting scammed. everybody in the region is getting scammed because it's an arms race, and we're getting scammed as Americans because it's a lot of our money. And what we should do is just have government entirely out of the process. If somebody wants to buy something from Lockheed or Boeing, they should be able to buy it from Lockheed or Boeing. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be something that government is all involved with, negotiating these contracts. Because what happens, obviously, is you have all these special interests, and then they lean on whatever administration. They say, hey, this is 280,000 jobs. Like, you better push for this. And the politicians make the same mistake they always do, which is meddling and saying like they think they know better. So they, push for these contracts, but the net result ends up money out of our pocket and out of the Saudis' pocket and into the pocket of these people who buy mansions in McLean. That's the real, if you really follow the money, it is a big scam with a lot of people, or actually a small number of people making a lot of money, some number of thousands of people right down in, McLean, Virginia. Like, literally you can go through the neighborhoods and you can see who lives there and look them up. You go right to $20 million house, $10 million house, $8 million house. You look the people up, see what they do. They're almost always executives at these contracting companies. They're making an absolute fortune on a big scam. And the scam, what's worse about the scam is that it's incentivized. At the end of the day, they want it to be a rough neighborhood. They don't want Saudi Arabia to be like New Hampshire. They want there to be a few bombings here and there and some stress. These like things like where I live in a compound, they have to protect that with usually the National Guard or a very, very heavy duty security. I mean, if you're living in a compound with a bunch of American engineers or something like that, it's millions in security. So there's a lot of incentive to keep these things, keep conflict going, and whether it's Ukraine or the Middle East or now Asia, and probably soon Africa as well. So yeah, we should be entirely out of that stuff. Mind our own business. If everybody wants to buy our products, fine. I it's kind of like my philosophy in life. Walk softly. If somebody really messes with you, teach them a lesson. Like I'm all for, if somebody hurts you, I'm all for, like, I'll go 0 to 150 real fast, but only if they deserve it. If they're not messing with us, I would want to leave everybody alone.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift toward domestic policy. So a couple days ago, Mar-a-Lago got raided by the FBI, and there's been a lot of people who have suddenly realized over the last couple days that the FBI is a political weapon, and no doubt that did break precedents to go after a former president. I don't think that's ever been done before with the FBI. But the FBI has always been a political weapon that different administrations have used to take out vengeance on their political enemies. So what would you do as senator to try to counteract the FBI, and not just the FBI, but the CIA, intelligence agencies in general? And what would you do to help protect our rights as citizens?
Yeah, I have sort of two things thinking about how I'd serve. And one is sort of my wish list, which would be just abolish the CIA, abolish the NSA, abolish the FBI, replace it with nothing. I think there is some place for intelligence through, the Pentagon to kind of know if somebody's about to nuke us. So it's not that I want to abolish all intelligence. It's just that those agencies have had so many problems, especially the FBI. And the CIA, and probably the NSA too. I just don't know, but they've just built up so much, bad institutional structure over the years. Like it's just like the whole thing's broken. It's like if you had a company, it wouldn't happen in the private sector because the company would have gone out of business. But if you just had a company where everybody was terrible and all their systems were terrible, the computers are terrible, and their procedures and policies, the whole thing is broken, and it's a bad culture. So yeah. And also, on my wish list is I wouldn't even have that many federal laws for the FBI to even enforce anyway. I would get rid of most of those laws. So that's my wish list. But, realistically, and I say realistically in today's terms, because this is a 6-year term. In 3 years, it could be completely realistic. We could have, if this kind of stuff keeps happening, we could absolutely face a point where the majority of Americans, the majority of senators agree to get rid of the FBI. I mean, we're in crazy times right now. Anything can happen in a year. But if it was today, I have the wish list, and then I have kind of more realistic things that would pass in sort of the current political environment. If I was in Congress, today, And that would be just way more oversight, trying to get to the bottom of we as Americans, and I really wish that people on the left would see this. We must demand that there's a high bar if you're going into a political opponent's home, and Democrats should see that. They should be demanding, even if you hate Trump, just say, okay, I hate him and I think he's probably guilty because my heart says so, and I really hate Orange Man, but let me see the evidence. You gotta see the evidence. You can't just go having a DOJ that raids somebody's house, a major political opponent, probably the most important political figure in the U.S. In opposition to the ruling party. Who's a bigger thorn in Biden's side? Who would be Biden's bigger enemy than Trump? DeSantis? I don't know. And now we've set this precedent. What are they going to do? They I think didn't a member of Congress have their phone seized the other day? What happens next? What if they raid DeSantis's house? What if they raid my house? I'm running for Senate. They certainly don't want me running for. I worry, and it makes me very sad and worried that one of my concerns when I decided to run is like, oh, are they gonna try and screw me? Are they gonna try and get me? What dirty tricks are they going to do? Am I going to be banned from social media like you are, banned on Twitter? Am I going to, what are they going to do? And that's a sad thing. Nobody should ask that, Republicans or Democrats. We should all demand that we have a real high standard for this kind of stuff, because otherwise we lose everything. If you lose your freedom, we're not going to be debating this stuff anymore. And the things the Democrats want to have happen aren't going to happen either.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And it is disheartening, like you said, that the left doesn't see that, because I feel like they used to be the ones who were sort of good on this, but now they've completely let that, or not completely, there's a few of them, but for the most part, they've let it go. And it's actually people on the right who are starting to see it. So I guess we just got to take progress wherever it shows up. I want to talk about the economy a little bit and bailouts and more stimulus packages that are sure to come, I would assume, at this point. It seems like what they always do is they'll draft a bill and it will be called like the Stop Lynching Grandmothers Act, and it has nothing to do with it. It's like subsidies to some corporation in Mexico or something, but they'll name it a certain way and they'll frame it as though if your representative doesn't vote for this, it's because they hate you and they want you to starve and they want you to die. And Rand Paul, actually, it's funny because very few people point to him as the original opposition to all this stuff. But even before lockdowns started happening, like right at the beginning with COVID, when there were just like these $1 billion bills that were being proposed, he was the lone guy saying like, no, this is crazy. We can't just do this. We're going to have repercussions for spending all this money further down the line. We're going to have inflation. Of course, all that stuff turned out to be true. It doesn't take a lot of courage to say that anymore. But up front, before the repercussions of the stupid bill start coming down the road, it takes a lot of courage to be like, no, we're not going to do this. We can't. It's going to hurt us. What is your position on spending more money to try to stimulate the economy? And what are you going to tell your constituents when they get angry that you didn't vote for it and didn't give them the free money that they could have got their business rolling again with, or whatever? How are you going to approach all that?
Yeah, hopefully I'd be able to explain to them that that the money's broken and the politicians broke it, and this thing that they call money is not really money anymore. It's a scam. They're just printing it from thin air, and they're giving a tiny sliver to the people, and then they're giving the rest to companies like BlackRock. BlackRock got $500 billion, by the way. So they're one single company, and it's just such a weird thing in economics. Like there's never been a thing like, oh, here's how the economy works, and here's what money is, and if there's a real bad flu and everybody's really, really, really scared, print $9 trillion. And that'll fix it. Like, it's just such a weird thing. They've broken stuff. It's very much like an Ayn Rand novel or something. It's like Atlas Shrugged. They break things and broke it more. And now they're like, oh, I know what we'll do. And they're just doing things that are going to break it even worse. I mean, it was very predictable. I wrote a paper in April 2020 predicting rampant inflation. And I don't think that was brilliant at all. I mean, it's right. Abundantly obvious. It's like saying there's going to be more tyranny. Like, duh. Look at who we're dealing with here. And so it works until it doesn't. eventually you end up like the Weimar Republic or Zimbabwe.
I'm sorry, Bruce, but almost nobody saw that coming except for us. Almost none of But yeah,
yeah, the politicians didn't. I mean, they don't even know. They were calling it Putin inflation. I mean, they don't know anything, and I mean, or they know, and they're just trying to fool the people into thinking that, that they can be believed. But I mean, it's really comical now because now they're grasping at nothing. I'd love to be in the press meetings at Biden, like they're like, hey, what can we say? Oh, I know what we'll say, that in July inflation stayed flat. It's up 8.5% for the year. They're just like, why can't? And it's crazy because they're just so bad at their messaging. What they should do is tell the truth. They should blame it on Trump. If they're being smart, blame it on somebody. But to just outright lie to the people and say that the inflation is flat, like, I don't know. It's almost good because they're lying so bad. They've got to be losing. The left is embarrassed by this administration, and all the people that I interact with in the campaign, all the haters and all the different people on the left. Actually, I shouldn't say haters. A lot of the people on the left, they're so embarrassed by Biden. You don't see them defending Biden. Like they're kind of like they know it's that he's bad. They can say they hate Trump worse, but they can't say Biden's any good.
Yeah, if they're like forced into defending him, it's something like, well, if he decides to run, then the voters will decide again. They never give like a straight answer. It's totally true. So last question I want to ask you is issues related. Are you more of an ANCAP or more of a constitutionalist? So what I mean by that is, do you think as a senator we should be following the Constitution, or do you more favor decentralization? So if a state decides that it wants to do something out of line with the Constitution, are you more of a libertarian who says, you know what, I don't live in that state, I'm not a senator from that state, there's nothing we can do about that state? Or do you think all 50 states should be forced to comply with the Constitution? How would you approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something I think about a lot. I was talking to Jeremy Kaufman at the event last night about it. We were going to have a debate, but we agree on so much we just made it a discussion. But that is a really interesting thing that I think about because, on the one hand, I want to decentralize as much as possible. I want ultimately individuals. So individual, and then if that doesn't work, local. If that doesn't work, state. If that doesn't work, federal. And hopefully by the time you get to federal, there's nothing left. Everything has been handled. So I want to decentralize it, put more power in the hands of the people. But there's very few legitimate roles of government, protection of life, liberty, and property, maybe enforcement of treaties, maybe making things like passports work so that people can come here or we can leave or what, very few things. But one of the things that I think is legitimate for government is to protect you from your rights from other government. So if you have let's suppose there was a town, let's suppose the town said, some woke town, Portsmouth says no more Republicans allowed, no more MAGA hats allowed. MAGA is a hate speech. You're not allowed MAGA hats. And they suppose it's, somehow works, there's a judge in on it or whatever. Then I think it is legitimate for a higher authority for the state to come and be like, no, that doesn't work. Now, suppose you had the state just do something. It goes back to my first point, which is government is this, toddler with a howitzer. It's the most dangerous thing. You really, really, really want to use it as a last resort. But if you have government stamping on people's rights, then you could have legitimacy for a bigger government authority to stop that state authority from hurting them. And this could be at the town levels too. You have like a lot of these petty tyrants in school boards and things like that. And there has been cases, that's one of the legitimate, there has been cases where like a school board has discriminated or something and the feds come in. I mean, in some cases, U.S. Marshals, and they're like, no, this is the law. So I have mixed feelings about that one. It would really be a case by case basis. Overall, I'd prefer the individual liberty thing, but we're in such weird times now. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if I wanted that. One of the only times that I want government to interfere, like I called the Board of Education and the governor on my kids' school. Like I want them to come in and say, no, you can't make Bruce's kids wear a political signal on, because that's all it is. It's nothing about health. That's why the board members at school board they're not wearing one when they're out at the football games or whatever. So I felt like they should come in and say, No, you can't do your state school. You can't do that. And so it is one of the rare cases that I would call for government interference to protect somebody. If you had some town, there was a town in Massachusetts when I was down there where the town manager wanted to go around and it's like a super lefty town, and he's a super lefty manager. He wanted to go around and make this gun registry for everybody. And that's a case where, I do actually, as anti-government as I do actually want the state to come in there and tell him to shut up and, protect the people. If he's going around using the police force for that, one of my favorite things to watch on TikTok and stuff is when you have cops arresting other cops. That's one of the best. You see the ATF guy a couple of weeks ago. He's knocking on doors saying, because they've been doing this. If you buy a lot of guns, they'll knock on your door and they want to do an audit, and they kind of intimidate you, and they have no right to do that. So this guy called the police and said, "There's somebody at my door trying to take my guns." They come and pull the gun on him. He acts all arrogant and refuses to do it, and they end up tasing him. And I love the idea of whether it's like the New Hampshire State Police arresting FBI or kicking them out or protecting somebody's rights, or it's like you only have one job. I don't really want you to have the job at all. But if you are going to steal my money and make me pay for you, at least be there the one time I need you, which is to protect my constitutional rights.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into the campaign a little bit, the specifics of it. So obviously, for those watching, I've had Jeremy Coffin on the show a few times. I'm working on his campaign in the Libertarian Party. Bruce is running in the Republican Party for the same position. But as he said earlier, he and Jeremy agree on virtually everything. I'm sure they could find some small disagreements somewhere, but very similar platforms. So what I'm going to do, Bruce, is I'm going to vote for you in the Republican primary. And then if you win, I'm going to have to reassess, honestly. I'm going to have to see what's going on. And I'm probably going to vote for you because, honestly, what I usually do is I try to vote for Republicans and Democrats because they just have a better chance of winning in general, just because of the way the system's set up. In 2016, I voted for Rand Paul for president, or I actually didn't get to vote for him because by the time he got to New Hampshire, he had dropped out, but I had supported him in the primary because I wanted to vote for him in the general election. I supported Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 election because I thought she was the best out of the two parties. And then both times I ended up voting Libertarian in the general election anyway because I just thought the options sucked. But what I want to ask you is, what if you don't win the primary? What are you planning to do? Are you GOP ride or die, or do the other candidates not represent you well enough, or do you not want to answer that question, or what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, main goal is to win the Republican primary, but so I don't want to speculate on if I were to lose what happens, but I will say that I'm consistent on liberty all the time, and I'll never, ever, ever compromise on that. And there's people that aren't liberty. That is, I'm never gonna support somebody who's gonna try and take your guns. I just can't. That's the whole point of what I'm running for. Like to say that if I go down there, I'll do what I say. So yeah, I'm all liberty, and I think that the liberty community and the Free Staters and the Libertarians in New Hampshire, I think that's how they are. I mean, if I said yesterday, like, hey, listen, everybody, I know this is unusual for me, but I actually do support the 87,000 IRS agents, and hear me out on this. There's some good economic reasons. Yeah, no one would stick with. I mean, they'd just be like, nope, lost you. I mean, they're very doesn't matter if they've been my friend for 10 years. They'd be like, nope. They don't compromise. And I've said that before. A lot of people say a lot of the Republicans, they're concerned. First they were concerned I was going to run for a third party. And I said, why would I do that? We already have a good third party. And then they're even more scared. And
I saw that, yeah.
So a lot of them are like very concerned about what could happen if I were to not win the primary. But what I've said to them, it's like, I don't control I'm not gonna. There's no Free Stater that's the people who support me. They're not gonna vote for somebody because I say to, like, hey, everybody, be a team player and vote for this statist over here. And they'll be like, okay, Bruce, we liked your signs, and so we will vote what you say. No, that's not how it is. They're for liberty and freedom. And they're for me because I'm for liberty and freedom. And they're never going to compromise on that. I mean, look at the voting in the last couple of elections. We had 41,000 votes in the last Senate seat for this very same election for the two Libertarian candidates, Aaron Day and the Libertarian candidate. And those are people who knew that those candidates couldn't win. I mean, 41,000 people in New Hampshire turn out 6 years ago, even knowing they can't win. So you're never going to convince these people, like, the Aaron Day voters and the Libertarian voters who have voted in that, they're just not going to compromise. It doesn't matter if they're the last vote and it's a choice between a statist Republican or a Democrat. They're going to go with the Libertarian. They're not going to vote for either. And because I think that that's especially true of like our movement and, a lot of the free staters and stuff. It's like the whole purpose is to not compromise. We're leave me aloneists who are just like, nah, we're just not playing the games, because we recognize, some of us moved here for exactly that reason. We recognize that like picking the lesser of two evils doesn't work. So I think there's a lot of us that are just like, yeah, we'll do whatever we can for liberty without compromise ever. I don't like compromising, because as soon as you compromise, you even in the campaign, I see it, there's all kinds of opportunities to, people say, if you just say this thing, we'll give you 250 grand on a PAC or whatever. It's very easy to get compromised. And I'm more of a no compromise kind of person.
All right. So how do people in New Hampshire vote for Bruce Fenton in the primary? When is the primary? What party do they have to be registered in? What status do they need to have? Just give us the whole lowdown. How can people vote for you in the primary?
Yeah. So it's September 13th, and you can register to vote at your local town hall or whatever. You can, you want to register as Republican. If you're independent, I believe you can pick a Republican ballot that day. You might want to double check, but I'm pretty sure. And I think even Democrat, even if you're registered Democrat, I think you may need to do it a day before or something like that, but you might be able to switch. But I think it might depend on the state or whatever, or the town. But if you're Democrat, you probably want to just switch over to Republican so you can vote for me. Or if you're independent, just make sure. Or if you're not registered at all, definitely go down to your town hall, go ahead and register as Republican. And that, obviously that doesn't affect how you vote in the general. You can vote,
right. You
can still vote Libertarian in the general or whatever. You can switch it back. I mean, you can switch back to independent, Democrat, whatever. But for the Republican primary, you got to, on the day on September 13th, you go in there, ask for the Republican ballot. And that really does matter. I mean, there are only about 150,000 people voted in the last couple Republican primaries, 143,000 or so. And there's maybe as many as 50,000 free staters. So if every free stater voted for me in the Republican primary, then there's a good chance I'd win. And the general election is really winnable. I mean, that's the crazy thing. If I were to win the primary, it's a very, very winnable seat, very likely to go red. And I think that's important too, because I don't think that any of the other candidates have as broad of appeal. I have a lot more Libertarians. I have a lot more independents. So I have the best chance of, because it's not going to be an easy seat. Maggie Hassan's spending a lot of money on ads, and, she's got the whole swamp behind her. So, we got to put the person with the highest chance of winning in there as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I still don't know if I feel good about it. I mean, I guess I don't feel good about it, but I voted for Maggie Hassan in 2016. And it was just because I thought, I keep forgetting her name. What was her name?
Kelly
Ayotte. I just thought she was awful on foreign policy and a bunch of stuff. So but I don't do that anymore. I'm like you. I don't do the, at least not that much. Like if someone's way better than someone else, okay. But that was a mistake. Maggie Hassan hasn't even been good on a lot of things Democrats are supposed to be good on. That's kind of like, if there's a Republican who sucks on drugs, I'm more forgiving because he's a Republican. And it's like, Republicans typically suck on this type of stuff. And if you're a Democrat and you suck on guns, it's like, okay, whatever, you're a Democrat, so I can kind of overlook it. But when you're a Democrat who's bad on civil liberties, like Maggie Hassan is, she and Jean Shaheen both voted with the Republicans against the amendment that would require the federal government to get a warrant to look through your search history and all sorts of terrible votes she's made. She's awful. So need to get her out of there. And then I'm not impressed with Baldick or Morse. I don't think they're frankly good on things Republicans are supposed to be good on. So I certainly hope you win, man. You'll have my vote. And I encourage everyone who's in New Hampshire, who's libertarian, or even if you're an America First Republican, this is your America First guy, not Taiwan first or Ukraine first or whatever else first. This is America first, New Hampshire first. So please go vote for Bruce in the primary. But before we wrap up, Bruce, where can people keep up with you? I've got your website and your Twitter linked in the description. Do you need donations? Do you need signs put out in people's yards? What do you need? How can people help?
Yeah, signs are great. We're trying to win the sign game. So, DM me or call me. My phone is everywhere, including on the signs. You can ask for a sign, and my campaign manager will make sure somebody delivers one. And it'd be even cooler if you take 10 or 20 signs and deliver them to your friends, or if you have a spot on a highway or big, we got the big signs, which we've been doing well on. So those kind of things help sharing my content. Donations are welcome. Even small donations help, because it just sort of shows that people care. And sharing the content, letting people know about it. I'm pretty accessible. I love doing like today. I'm doing a Twitter Spaces. At 4:00. I do, Clubhouse. I take questions. I've got my mobile phone out there, and just getting the word out, getting people to show up on September 13th and vote for me. That's the next step. So I appreciate every bit of support. Politics is kind of a team sport.
Yeah, it is, man. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Good luck. I hope you win, and you got my vote.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I will catch you on the next episode.